everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. We are really excited today. We have special guests here. We have friends of the podcast, our good friends from It's Complicated podcast. Jen and Lauren are here. And thank you so much, ladies, for coming on the podcast.
We are happy to be back on again. We always love chatting with you, so we're stoked to be here.
Yeah, so how have you been? It's been a crazy time that we've experienced as a country. And so how have you been surviving this quarantine experience this last few months?
Well, I have just been trying to keep, my life as normal as humanly possible, just from the comfort of my home. So whether it's catching up with friends or working out or even doing virtual dates, I'm just trying to make the best of the whole situation, ordering in my favorite food to support local restaurants. And that's really it, catching up on my favorite movies. What more could you want? Forced binge watching.
Yeah. I mean, binge watching has been definitely happening over in my parts. I actually had a baby at the end of April. Yeah. Being pregnant during a pandemic was quite scary. And then having the baby.
Oh my gosh.
Scary. Although I will say it was, once I got to the hospital, it was less scary than I felt like it was going to be. I literally walked like straight into the hospital room and then stayed there the whole time. And all the doctors and nurses had masks on. So it was like, it was actually fine. It just, I think like I had a lot of anxiety about going into it, but
sure.
I think for me, I've been, I think I would have to have been sort of staying home a lot anyway after having a baby.
Yeah.
So it's not like drastically different than what it might have looked like without a pandemic. But yeah, the scare and fear factor is there. And then, yes, like if there is a chance to go out, like I don't go out, like my husband will go out, or like my mom came to help, she'll go out for me, just because it's like, I don't want to get something and bring it back to the baby, or have like bring the baby with me. I've done it. It's just not ideal. So there's that, but it added layer, but it's been okay for me. I've been doing like what Jen's been doing, like binge watching, not virtually dating because I'm not, but I'm living vicariously through Jen, and like getting back to working out and like doing stuff around the house too, because I just moved also with like try to pile everything on at once. And so like together has been, like organizing and going through stuff and, that sort of thing.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
You took finding something to occupy yourself during quarantine very seriously. Like, I didn't have a baby.
Yeah.
That was good planning on your part.
Right. Yeah. That was totally planned on my part.
Well, that's exciting. So you have to say, is it a boy or girl?
Yes, we had a boy. His name is Austin, and he is just 2 months old now.
Well, congratulations. That's so great.
Thank you. Yeah, there's always an added layer of things to talk about on our podcast, since we talk about dating and relationships, but it's every stage of the relationship. So like now having a baby is like part of our topic. Whereas when we started the show, Jen and I were both just talking about like straight dating, and that was it. And now it's like this layer of the pandemic. Like Jen brings so many fun stories to the table because of the online dating aspect of like virtual dating. It's great. It's so great.
So when you virtual date, do you is it on like a Zoom call or how does that work?
It's always on FaceTime, unless they have an Android, which I haven't really faced that issue yet. But I guess I'm only dating Mac people or Apple people.
That's a filter.
But we usually do a FaceTime, and it's just like hanging out, but virtually. And sometimes we'll have like a glass of wine, or like they'll make a drink of whatever they want. Once I did a date where we both ordered sushi so that we were like having dinner together, and it was like the same restaurant in theory.
That is cute.
I know. And I actually did venture out twice for a socially distant walk with somebody. So that came after a phone call. So I already knew that like it was potentially worth, leaving the house for, because we already had a little bit of banter and a connection. So, I also quizzed them on how seriously they were taking this whole COVID thing, because if they were one of those people that did not take it seriously, I didn't want to like put myself around them in jeopardy.
Right.
So, you know, that's a new layer of filtering dating these days, is how seriously are you taking the world around us? Because if you're not, then I'm sorry, this bus has left.
Yeah.
No,
Are these people that you typically meet on like Tinder, or just depends?
So I am not on Tinder, but I am on Hinge and The League and Bumble and Raya. So I know so many, but my favorite is Hinge. So I try and really just meet people from there because I find the most value in what they're putting out about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like they put a real like conscientious profile out versus just an image and a sassy bio that says my grandparents met on this app, where you see on most of the apps these days. So I'll meet them there. And then from there, we move on to texting and calling and then FaceTiming. And then a couple people made it to the first round of in-person.
you guys, do we think that like this next round of like Hallmark Christmas holiday movies is going to include like virtual dating? Because I feel like it will.
I think it's got to.
Like where like they meet and it's like a quarantine, like, you know, something that would like mimic what's happening right now. I feel like there's going
Yeah, I mean, I've just got to believe that some of these writers are fast away writing stories. But I mean, and if you think about it, it would be a smart movie to make anyway. If you're worried about the safety of your cast, you don't want to have like town festivals and stuff with lots of group scenes and things. Like, you want to have as small a cast and as small a settings as you possibly can. So why not do some virtual type? It would be they're always trying to recreate You've Got Mail, but this would be it would be on another level.
It would be perfect, and people could totally relate to. It would be very timely. Like, we'll see something.
They would.
Yeah.
I think it could be fun with the right script. You could also easily make it into a Lifetime cautionary tale, scary movie.
Oh my God.
Thriller.
Totally could. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so up for you, Rachel. Now you need to write this script, this idea.
I'll work on it. So, yeah, do you think that we've like can transition away from online dating then, like eHarmony, these kind of Match.com stuff like that, and it's now the app, those I hadn't even heard of some of the ones that you mentioned. But do you think that that's kind of happened? Do we not use those sites anymore because they're so expensive?
I don't know. I mean, Jen, I feel like maybe I'm wrong. I've actually done both. So when Match.com first came out, I did that. And then I also did like the dating apps when those came out too. Like when Tinder was like the first one, and then it was like Plenty of Fish. I did Bumble, all those. Hinge, like Jen. I feel like it's an age demographic thing, and maybe that's incorrect for me to say, but I think the Match.com and the what's the other big online one, Jen?
eHarmony?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like those are more popular with an older crowd. Not always necessarily. I have a girlfriend that like 5 years ago got married from Match.com, but I think it skews more to the like second time marriage crew, older people who are like want to fill out the profile and be super serious about it, because it feels more like traditional matchmaking, which I think goes along with what they're more familiar with. It's less gamified and less like millennial feeling, and more like, okay, I can do this virtually, but it feels more like my aunt is setting me up on a date with somebody who's like quality, and they trust the website, and they like that it costs money because they think it makes it legit. I don't know that. So I think it just skews older for those reasons.
So I actually think that it also is dependent. It's dependent on the location. So like LA is a very saturated market with apps, like all of the ones I mentioned, and then Tinder on top of that. There's J Swipe. There's all of these, and there's new apps that come out all the time. But those are like the big ones. So I think if you're in a city where those are pretty much the going dating app, then you use the apps, because that's where you're going to find more similar people to you. I actually think that Match and like eHarmony are great for the reasons that Lauren said, that, you know, you can fill out the longer profile, that they cost money. So you feel like there's a greater investment on the person's side and they're really looking for love. But I actually went on Match.com recently because I was like, you know what? I am somebody that wants to find love. And like maybe the apps aren't the place to do it for me. And maybe I should venture into the Match.com pool. So what happened though when I did was it's a little bit of an inundation because everyone can reach out to you. You don't have to match for them. They can just all send you a note. So it's a lot of communication. The other thing too is I didn't particularly see anybody I was attracted to. And that might just be because, you know, I have a certain type or whatever it is. But in the however many people are on that site, for me, it did not seem to do the trick. And I also don't necessarily want to spend $45 a month or commit to 6 months for a discount. I'm like, if it's going to take 6 months, why am I on this thing? Like, hurry it up. Yeah. Thought we were doing this because you're
right.
I felt the same way, Jen. Even, gosh, I think it was like over a decade ago that I did Match.com. And I felt the same way. I didn't feel like the types of guys I was seeing on the site were my type. I did go on like, I think 2 dates from there, but I forced myself to do it because I was unsure. Like, maybe I'm just not getting who this guy is through the site. And like, I was right when I would go on the dates, but I also felt as though, it was too inundating with the messages as well. Like, it was so hard for me to keep up of who was messaging me and responding without like letting some people slide through. Like, it was too much.
Yeah, because I've tried sites like that and I have had no luck. I mean, just, I don't know. So maybe I need to try some of those apps. I mean, I've tried apps off and on. There's one here called Mutual, which is, I think, a Utah thing that I've tried. But I don't know. It's so weird because I'm so up to date when it comes to all the other types of social media. When it comes to, like, I'm really active on Twitter, really active on, but the for some reason the online dating I'm not very good at. I feel like I just struggle.
I feel like if you're good with things like that, like if you're proficient in Twitter and social apps like that, then you would excel on a dating app. Maybe just give it a little more time or diversify your dating app portfolio, as we like to say. Like, do Mutual, do other ones that your friends like you like, and try out like 3 of them at a time, and then don't overwhelm yourself.
That's a good idea.
Since you're proficient in technology and apps and stuff, I think it'd be good. Plus, it's faster. Like, Match.com is a different type of speed. Like, dating apps are faster, so you're getting a more immediate, potentially immediate, like, question and answer session happening with somebody. So I don't know. And Mutual is probably great because it's like Jen brought up, it's your area. So you get a lot of people that live near you and people like you that come from the same place as you. So that could be good potentially for like mutual connections and stuff.
Yeah. So if you're listening, you want to check me out on me, I'll add myself to Mutual. So look it up if you're
find her.
Yeah. So very good. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, this whole modern dating. It's challenging. It's hard to meet people, especially once you're out of school. I think it's way harder to meet people the way, I don't know, at least for me, it seems like post once I finished grad school, it's just way harder. I mean, it's been 10 years now since I was in grad school, but I feel like it's just been way harder in my 30s to date than in my 20s.
I agree with that 100%, because of the same things that you're saying, that people are not as conveniently located to you, and you are now forced to meet strangers, and like that doesn't always feel so great unless, you know, like in Lauren's case, like you met your husband through a mutual friend, so that was like a nice breezy way to meet, and you could gradually get to know the person.
It's so ideal.
Yeah, and it's like in all of our favorite Hallmark movies, you meet somebody in town, or they're your high school sweetheart that resurfaces. They're already in the system basically, and you don't have to start all over.
Yeah.
Or maybe
you guys, it was kind of like that. I had just broken up with this guy who was like would have been like the villain in the Hallmark movie. He was like horrible. He was not nice at all. I was like in the worst mood because there had just been like an incident with him, and it'd been like 4 days, and I went to a pool party, and like my really good friend in LA introduced me to James, the guy I'm with now. And like at first we did not get along really. It wasn't bad, but we just didn't catch each other's eye. And it wasn't until Jen and I had a podcast launch party like a couple weeks ago that my friend brought him back to it. And then he was like, "Oh, who's that girl?" And our mutual friend was like, "That you met that girl at the pool party." He was like, "What? That's the same girl?" It was like a total like, and then ensued from there. But it was funny. Like it was like a meeting that was like, yeah, through a mutual friend, and we were like we didn't initially connect, and it was like I was in a horrible mood because of the bad guy I dated. It was like funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny often in these kind of movies, the heroine will be irritated with her loved ones they keep setting her up with people, and I'm like the reverse. I'm like, please, friends, family, set me. Like they could overdo it, I guess, but I'm like, it's hard to meet people. If you know nice people that you think I might actually get along with, absolutely, set me up, please. I need all the help I can get.
It is hard to meet people, but I will say this. I love, and Jen and I have talked about this on our show, I love the way my friend Noel introduced us, like the way he played matchmaker. And he's done this before. And I think it's a great tip to share with people. Like, Rachel, if you're matching people up or if your friends are matching you up, it's a good thing to share. He always said, "Hey, like I'm going out tonight." Well, I know that's different now because of like the pandemic, but when things open up, I'm going out tonight with a couple people that are coming out with me tonight. And I think you might really want somebody, but just come out. It's a great crowd. Yeah. There's people that will be your friends. You need to meet these people anyway, but there's somebody that I think you might be
strategy.
And just come out and see. And that way, if you naturally connect with the person that this guy had in mind, then it's up to you to like continue making the date and going out and making the connection, because then you're also letting it happen organically, as opposed to like pairing two people up that are then forced to go out and may not like each other. If you can go out in a setting, sort of have your feelers out there for like, oh, is somebody here somebody I might be interested in, and then let the rest happen naturally. I loved how he did that, and he did it to me a couple of times before I ended up meeting James, and it always really worked and felt natural. So now Jen and I like to tell people that, like, if you're matchmaking or you want to be like put together with somebody, tell your friends that story, because it's a really good natural way to sort of do it.
Yeah that makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense. Even if you're having I don't know, even if you're having like a virtual watch of a movie or something like that, you could kind of clue the other person that like, hey, this person's going to be participating in the chat. Maybe, you know, whatever, I think you guys might get along, and then you can chat or just kind of, I think you could make it work even in this virtual world.
Well, and the other thing too is like, depending on which city you're in, like some parks are open. So people are definitely taking advantage of this like whole new picnic adventure. Everyone's like doing a different type of picnic and different parks, and you bring your favorite things. And
I feel like most places parks are open.
Yeah. So then you could do a picnic, you could bring your friends, you could socially distance, but you can at least be in a similar place and can connect that way. And there's also like, you know, depending on if you've got an outdoor deck or a patio or something outdoors that makes you feel better, you could have a dinner party or a game night outside or whatever it is, where you're not putting yourself or others at risk, but still getting to be in each other's presence.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so once you have secured the date, so we've been talking about all these apps and how you meet people and everything like that. So I had I created a list of some tips, what I think makes for a great date. And I figured we did this in our Make It a Date episode a couple of weeks ago, where we pitched ideal Hallmark dates. So we created for instance, I had The Birthday Wish, the movie The Birthday Wish, and in that movie, they ate chicken soup and a giant chocolate chip cookie at different points of the movie. But so as part of my dream date in that episode, I pitched watching The Birthday Wish and eating soup and a giant cookie.
How
and
cute.
that would be a fun date. And so that's what we did. It was fun. But as part of that episode, I gave my tips for what I think makes for a great date. And so I thought it'd be perfect to have you guys on, go over each of these tips. You're the experts, the dating experts, and we could see what do you think of my list, and if you want to add to it, take away, whatever, and then we could talk about each of these
Sounds
items.
good.
All right.
Okay. Okay. All right. The first one I have is to plan ahead, but don't be too rigid to the plans. So, like, the way I figure, I think most people don't want someone just making it up on the fly. You want somebody who's put some thought to try to make something memorable and fun. But you also don't want somebody who's like, we gotta leave in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like, what's going on? Somebody who's really super rigid is kind of a turnoff. I don't know. What do you think about planning for a date?
I live for planning.
Well, Jen is all over this one, although I do have something to say, but Jen is going to be good on this one. So
okay, good.
We all have the internet and a watch. So like, I feel like by asking somebody what they like to do, or like if they have any things they hate to do, like just to get some parameters, they can easily come up with a really fun date, or even a choose your own adventure. So like, do your research, come up with like maybe a couple options you could suggest to them for food, or a couple ideas, and like run it by them. And then maybe, knowing now what they are more interested in doing, then have like a backup plan too. So like, okay, if we go, I'm just going to throw miniature golfing out there, even though that's clearly not an option right now, but we're going to pretend the world is normal. So let's say you go miniature golfing versus rock climbing. So, which I would probably pick. So we go miniature golfing. And then if after that guy already knows in his mind, I have a bar that I could suggest, or I have an ice cream place I could suggest. And then once we're done miniature golfing, he's like, so would you want to go grab a drink, or would you be interested in grabbing some ice cream? Knowing that he'd already thought it out based on where we're at, like what time we were going to wrap up, like all of that, like makes me feel special, and that he put effort and thought into it, and that he heard what I'm interested in and is trying to impress me by showing he listens, by showing he plans, by showing that he likes me so much he doesn't want our time to end, so he wants to come up with more fun things to do. But like having all of that just like ready to go in advance in his pocket,
I agree. I think especially if it shows a certain degree of thoughtfulness, like if he was like, hey, I see that you on your profile that you really like ice cream. Here's this ice cream place, or frozen yogurt. You really like frozen yogurt. Here's this place that I've heard is really good. Why don't we go check it out? Like that shows that like he's thought this through, and isn't just like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What should we do? Like, that's the worst.
Absolutely. I love that. I think the moral of the story here is the backup plan is great, because if you're on the date and we've all been on dates where we're like, well, great, I really don't want to be here anymore. So then you can end the date. But you've also been on dates where you're like, I don't want this to end. So you have the suggestion, like Jen said, if you're planning the date, go to the main part of the date and then have a potential like backup plan. Like, okay, well, if this is going great, we could go get ice cream, or we could go do this thing, depending on what the other person likes. I will say the rigid plans, I think, also keep in mind on the flip side that if you expect the person planning the date to be like perfect with the things they're planning, I think that's also not okay. So you need to be a little less rigid with your expectations if you're on the being asked out end, because this person doesn't know you. They are getting to know you, and they're trying to do the best they can, potentially, unless you're getting a major like feeling that they're not putting in any effort. But if you think they are, and it's still like not going according to what you like particularly like, just keep in mind like, this person doesn't know you and they're not your boyfriend yet. So just like be a little more like open.
Yeah. In one very memorable date that I went on, this was when I was in college. The poor guy, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Like when he came to pick me up, the car alarm went off on his car and he could not get it off for forever. And he had been really, really late, and he'd actually messed up the date previously. Like I thought it was another day, and he told me the wrong date. It was to a dance anyway, and so my whole family, he's coming up, and then the alarm is just ringing, and my whole family is just in the house, just laughing and cracking up at this poor guy, and and we ended up, I don't think I ever saw him again, but ever went out with him again, but we had a nice time, and we just kind of laughed it off. But it was just one of those things where it just seemed like everything that could go wrong went wrong, and it's, things happen, plans aren't perfect, and what are you gonna do?
Right.
And so you just kind of have to laugh it off. And you can tell a lot about a person too when how they react to things like that. I mean, if it rains, if you're going out miniature golfing and it rains, you
Yeah,
can't control the weather.
exactly.
So you just laugh and say, okay.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I agree with that. All right. The next recommendation is, if on a double date or group date, make sure you schedule in couple time. Because that can, especially when you're younger, I think you do more of the group dating. And you don't want to go out with somebody on a double date or a group date and you spend the whole time talking to your buddy, your friend, because you're nervous or whatever. Right. So you want to make sure that you, if you're doing something like that, that you make sure that you consciously, I'm going to spend time with this person I'm on a date with.
If you're the type of person who's super nervous on a date, this could be a nice like buffer, but don't use it as a crutch, because you can't then just like you said, talk to the friends the whole time. It's great to see how someone you might potentially date reacts in a group setting and around your friends. Clearly, that's an important thing. But yeah, I would definitely make sure you pick something where you can go off on your own and it wouldn't be weird.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're doing like group miniature golf, like maybe you could play as a team or something, as a team of two or something like that, or or find some way that you kind of can pair off a little bit, and or at the very least, if you go to dinner, that you sit next to each other so that you can talk. And yeah, I think it's important. I'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. They're the good folks over at Care of, and they make getting vitamins and supplements easy and hassle-free. They can come right to your door, so you don't have to go out shopping or take any kind of risk to go get your vitamins. They come right to you. And what's really nice is that you can take their online quiz and you answer some questions about your diet, your health goals, and your lifestyle. And they recommend the vitamins that will be the most helpful for you. And so, for instance, I took the quiz, and it only, like I said, only takes a few minutes, and we were able to narrow down some things that will help me hopefully with my sleep, because that's one of my biggest health problems, is that I have a hard time with my sleep issues. And so it's really great. They come to you right to your door, and you get these little packets that you can take every day. And so if you want to put some in your purse, or you're traveling or something like that, they're very, very, very easy for you to take. And it's just really positive, very personal. There's a great attention to detail. They have great quality that you can see and taste. They focus on quality, science, and research that goes into each of their products and recommendations. Their yummy protein powders are made with wholesome ingredients you can recognize, like organic cocoa and pink Himalayan sea salt. I've been really impressed with what I've been sent and what I've tried, and I think that it's something that can help you to have more energy, to feel better, depending on the vitamins that you are in need of. So I recommend taking the quiz, getting the vitamins that you need, and checking out Care of. For 25% off each of your first 3 months of Care of, go to takecareof.com/hallmarkies25. Enter code hallmarkies25. That's 25% off each of your first 3 months of Care Of. Go to takecareof.com/hallmarkies25, enter code hallmarkies25. If you have an established relationship, if you're doing a group activity, you want to make sure that you make time to spend with each other as a couple.
Oh yeah, that's very important. You're never going to get to know the person that well if you don't.
Yeah, and you need that time, even if you're married, that you need that time together. That's important for a relationship. So all right, next one is put away your phone, because even if the phone vibrates or they get a phone call and they don't answer it, it's still distracting. It's still I joke that cell phones are the thief of love in Hallmark movies. It's like, oh no, they were just about to have a moment and then the phone rang and it's work or whatever. And so I think for the most part, unless they're a doctor or there's some reason that they need to have their phone, most people can put it away for, an evening. And I think that it's important to do. What do you think about that?
This is not really up for debate. Like if you're a doctor or there's a kid involved or something, fine. But like, I don't think, Jen, right? I mean, you put your phone away for the date.
So I was actually on a date during this whole pandemic. One of the nights that like the restaurants started opening up or were given the go ahead to. So we went to an open air patio to have some food and drinks. And I remember sitting across from him and like, he kept picking up his phone and I was like, what's happening? Like, is there like an urgent matter? And he was like, oh no, like I'm just like telling my friends about like how restaurants are open and how wild this is. I'm like, so you have to tell them right now while you're on this date. And then he's like, well, they're also asking about you. I'm like, so you have to write them back while you're sitting in front of me. Like, is that necessary? And then he was like, yeah, who cares? And I was like, check please. But so I like made it through the date, obviously, because I'm not a monster, but though I have walked out of other dates before. So I figured, you know what? This is this is a pandemic date. It won't go on forever. So the show will end soon. So I'm like, all right, you finish this meal, let him pay the check, and then like walk yourself home. So he tries to make plans with me again. And I was just like, no, I'm not interested. Bye. And like, he didn't really understand. And I was like, well, you were on your phone. You were kind of rude and like a little vulgar. I'm like, that's just not my jam. Our energies do not match up, nor does our etiquette.
Right.
I just think, like you were saying, unless you are someone who's about to receive an urgent call, like I'll keep my phone out like in case of emergencies, but it's also on silent. So like if I see it's someone calling me over and over again, then I'll deal with it. Or like, it's really rare that an emergency will happen. So I just don't expect it to on that 2-hour date. So I try and keep my phone away unless I know, again, that there's something that is coming, like maybe a call for work or something that like I've been waiting for all day from my doctor or whatever it is that I know is coming. And then once I get that call, I can put my phone away for good. Or if you're meeting up with, let's just say, another couple. So like you just need to keep your phone out for logistics. But otherwise, no other conversations should be happening. I think it's the rudest thing you can do to somebody is to neglect their time. They have given up whatever else they could be doing in the world to sit across from you or to do an activity with you. The least you can do is focus on them and be present. And if nothing else that we've learned in 2020 is to be present, because we don't know if this world's going to be over by the end of the year.
Yeah. Because even if you don't end up like pursuing a relationship with a person, like you have a chance to talk to somebody. And I mean, again, in 2020, if we've learned anything, it's that like human interaction is valuable. I mean, I've been quarantined by myself where I had no human interaction except for online and through the podcast for months, and that was really hard. And I mean, my parents were just up the street, but people were worried that I had the virus, but I didn't have the virus. But I couldn't see them on Easter. I had to just call them, and that was so hard. And so like, it's worth, if you're gonna go to all the effort to have this interaction with this other human, you might as well actually have it to its full capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the very least, have manners and say, excuse me, if you have to take a message or a call. Like,
you have to take a message. You can explain yourself very nicely. Like, I am so sorry. I just need to let you know this is an emergency, whatever.
Yeah. Because even if it just vibrates, it's still a distraction. It's still interrupted conversation. And so, yeah, turn off the phone. You can do it. I know it's hard for me as well, but you got to do it. Got to do it. All right. Number 4. Avoid one line or one word answers to questions. And the thing about this one that I like is that, I mean, I guess thinking about this is that if somebody asks you what's your favorite movie, they're not interrogating you. It doesn't, like, they're not going to write this on your permanent record that, oh, this is it. You have to have the for sure. They're just trying to start a conversation. So you say something and then we go back and forth about, oh, I like that one too. And you go back and forth. If you just are yes and no kind of person, then nobody will ever really get to know you. And there was a friend of a friend of my roommates that, this was in my late 20s. This friend, he was so frustrating because he had no opinions about anything. You'd ask him, oh, so what do you like? What do you like to read? Or you're like, oh, I don't know. Whatever. I like whatever. And I was just like, he was the most boring human being I've ever met. And I think thought maybe he was being, I don't know, that he was being accessible or something, but it was just, just say something. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, maybe he was trying to be like agreeable, like the fear that you're going to say something polarizing and you're going to make somebody upset. Obviously, you're, going to try to keep it as, like kosher as you possibly can on the first date until you get to know somebody you feel more comfortable opening up about your like deepest, darkest thoughts. But yeah, definitely answering questions with more detailed answer is great. And like asking a question at the end of your answer is also great too, because most of the people will chime in just by natural conversation cadence. But, it does help to then say, oh, I like this. Or instead of even the boring, what about you? If someone asks you what your favorite movie is, you could say, I like The Wizard of Oz. Okay, well, what's your favorite comedy? Or what's your favorite type of music? Like, segue into something else that's related to keep the conversation flowing. But always ending with a question is helpful.
That's true. And what do you like about The Wizard of Oz? That movie scared me as a kid, and so then you've started a conversation and you're going from there.
Right.
And I think that's really, really important because and that is one great thing about knowing about TV and movies, because I just feel like, especially on a first date, everybody likes some kind of television and movies. Everyone likes something, so you can find out what they like. You can talk for the whole night.
It's entertaining. It brings people joy, and it's a source of fun and entertainment. So it's a great initial conversation starter.
The other thing too is like, I think it tells you a lot about somebody if they don't put forth energy or effort into the conversation. Like either they're not into you or they're just not an interesting person. So it's really like, you shouldn't work that hard to get something out of somebody. Like imagine if somebody went on an interview for a job and they like had nothing to say about themselves or the job. So like you wouldn't hire that person if they're not trying to sell themselves or impress you. So why would you want to, at least if you're talking to them on, let's just say an app or texting or matching on some site, like how can you go from there to anywhere else if they don't give anything or make any sort of effort? I actually unmatch people if their conversation is very dull on the app, because it's like, this is the most dull part of this whole thing. And if you can't even make this work, then what's like, I'm not going to want to get myself off my couch to go meet you or put on makeup or make any sort of effort for you if you can't hold a conversation. I can talk to a wall, so it's not me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the second part, there's sort of a second part of this topic about conversation in general is try to remember one thing that the person says. And this might sound weird, but there's nothing more attractive than when you've been on a date or even just interacted with somebody, and then the next time you see them, they remember some weird obscure thing that you had mentioned on the previous encounter. So like, I don't know, say someone remembers that I mentioned the fact that I have done open water swimming, and so then they remember that. And so if you and I learned this from a friend of mine that I was always so impressed about how he remembered. Every time I would see him, he would ask me, "But how did that go?" Or "How did that?" And I'm like, "How did you remember that?" Like, of all the people, I mean, how did you? And it was something he consciously did every time he would try to remember one at least one thing about a person. And I think if you were dating, like, that's just so attractive. Then the second time you see him, second date, whatever, you remember, oh, how's your nephew doing, or how's, just one detail, and you're like, oh, they really were listening to what I was saying. And sure, try to learn more than just one thing, but to really try, I think it's sort of a good rule of thumb
Yeah.
to really and pay attention to what the other person is saying.
Jen,
And then yeah.
Jen, don't you make notes on your phone for this? Like when you're talking to somebody, I think you like if they mention something's coming up, you'll make a note in your phone to like remind
I
yourself to
do.
ask
You are
them.
right. And
Yeah.
the only reason I do this is
That's
because
smart.
I was called out many years ago by a guy I went on dates with. Like, I don't even know how many dates I went on with him, but he would say to me, "You don't remember anything that I tell you or that we do." So I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I don't. And like, so listen, active listening is a skill. Also, like, exercising your memory, also a skill. I can't rely though on my memory at this point. It's like too much happening. So I write things down in my notes in my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I do that with friends
That's
too. I
great.
do it with family also. This became like an overall habit throughout my life now because now I remember what people might want for a gift or how I can surprise somebody with something or suggestions that they might have
Mm-hmm.
forgotten they like would have maybe wanted to do for their birthday or whatever it is. I feel like I've got like a arsenal of information that I can show that I care and help their lives be a little bit better. So it works for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really smart. I think it just makes people feel heard, and even if it's not even dating, just friends, or I mean, it'd be a great skill to learn for work, that you remember the people that you've interacted with and you remember details about them. Like, it's just
Yeah,
it's
I
a
mean,
good quality to
I
have.
document everything I do, like
Very
just
much.
so if it's not on my to do list, it won't get done. And I've actually been doing it since the beginning of quarantine, so I
Mm-hmm.
can go back to like March and know what I did then. I know what I've
Mm-hmm.
accomplished over this time. I know if I've had dates with
Mm-hmm.
people, and so I've celebrated different things, like Lauren's baby being
Yeah.
born and like her virtual baby shower and things. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just getting in the habit of writing down important things will help you and the people around
Agreed. All right. Next, we have one that's very difficult for me is try to make eye contact. I have a lazy eye, so making eye contact is very hard for me, and I have to really focus and make it a priority to do it. But I still think it's really important because it's just distracting, and so even though it's tough for me, I it's got to make the list.
Yeah, I agree that eye contact is important, especially right now when you're out. If you go out and you have your city allows it and you're wearing masks, all you can see are people's eyes. Although I did see an ad for a
Yeah,
mask
that's true.
the other day where it was like a clear part over your mouth, which I thought was quite interesting. But I also think we need to think about too, like there's people out there who are hearing impaired and it is hard for them right now, like to read, you can't read lips if people read lips. So
Right.
I think that the necessity for that mask with the clear thing over the mouth may have been born from that, but also your eyes
Mhm.
are very communicative. And I think even if you're, let's just say there was no pandemic, we'll go back to like the idea that we live in a normal world, like Jen said. When you're at like a social gathering, if you're across the room from somebody and you want to, like, I don't know, making eye contact and smiling like with your eyes or giving a certain look is very telling. And then also when you meet
Hmm.
the person, you definitely want to look like you're engaging and listening. But right now, eye contact is huge because sometimes you can only see
Yeah,
you guys. So in the initial
it's
meeting, yeah,
true.
for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point. That I mean, and who knows how long we'll be wearing masks regularly? I mean, it's probably going to be. uh, I mean, who knows? It could be forever. I mean, that's one difference between us and over in Asia. It's in Asia. It's very common to wear masks. It's just like we go on the subway or the train or whatever, and you see lots of people with masks. So it's you know, it could
Seems
just
that
be
way.
sort of a new part of life.
It could definitely.
Even once we get a vaccine, So I don't know. It's interesting. Okay. Next, we have a pretty obvious one, I think. Avoid politics, other controversial topics. But it's hard that right now because it just seems like everything ends up becoming politics. So you really have to consciously be like, okay, for a first date, try to avoid those kind of. That's why it's just talk about movies.
Yeah,
Safe for the most part.
that makes sense. And I think right now it is a very, like, on the top of everybody's mind. It obviously should always be something that, is, I think, a moral compass for you and for somebody you're interested in to eventually have that
Mm-hmm.
conversation. But right now it's on the top of people's minds. So if you want, I think a good way to say this too, like topically, is how to avoid that, how to steer the conversation away from that topic if it comes up, since it's more likely to come up now.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
would say, definitely save it for later. But yeah, I think just thinking of ways to steer it away, just hopefully people take social cues, right? Like you can answer questions like very generally and then steer however you want the conversation away. Maybe say, oh, sorry, one second, I'm just going to use the bathroom really quick. If you can't think of something, I'll be right back. Excuse me. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really interesting what you're saying. And I agree. I think there's a lot of different opinions on it, though. Hey, what do you think about? And then try to steer it into something else because it's going to
Mm-hmm.
probably come up and you want to have sort of an out about how to move around that right now. It just shouldn't be something that's talked about like right away, I don't think.
That's good counsel. To have something like talk about Disney. Almost everybody has at least one Disney movie that they like. You're like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. But yeah, you're right. You kind
I
of
mean,
need a way to kind
you
of
don't want
move
to,
it around out of
let's
those.
not talk about racial injustices. Let's talk about Ariel and her perfect hair
Right.
because really.
And also,
Never
she
mind.
was super resourceful if you think about it as it relates to a pandemic. Like when people are
Yeah,
like,
that's
"Oh,
right.
I don't have all the things I need," she's like,
Yeah,
"What? I got a fork. That's a brush."
yeah,
It's a dingle hopper. It's a dingle
that's
hopper.
right.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean Rapunzel, she was basically like living in quarantine her whole life. So I mean,
Man.
Yeah.
in the
And
tower.
she still found love if we're all,
Yeah,
being honest.
that's
So
right.
I think that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this doesn't have as much to do with right now because movie theaters are closed, but this is still the philosophy of this podcast. And I don't know if you two will agree, but we have always said movie first and then dinner. Because,
Okay, wait. Now,
dinner,
why do you say that?
we say that because then
You,
you can talk about the movie at dinner.
Ooh,
If you
wait,
do
okay, but
dinner
what
first,
time what time do you go to the movie then?
see, that is a bit of a struggle because a lot of times movies start at 8 o'clock. And so that will, like, there's usually not as many at 7 o'clock. But if you can find a 7 o'clock show, that's ideal. And but or earlier, I guess, if you don't want to be out too late. I mean, the dinner and a movie date is in its nature a long date. But
right. I was going to say that's a long day. Yeah.
but I still think that yeah, if you try to find like a 7 o'clock ish movie, and then maybe and not even do full dinner, maybe do ice cream, or if you drink, do drinks or something like that for a first date. but I still
Yeah.
think it. Then you have all the stuff, and you can tell a lot by the way that different people react to the same movie, and like the things that they notice, and the things, whether it's this person notices the music, or they notice the performances, or they hated it. Like, why did they hate it? And I think I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that makes a lot of
I think that
sense.
makes sense.
It just may run a little bit late. Sorry to interrupt you, Lauren. I would say the one caveat is maybe you do it like, you sort of adjust it for the pandemic and do a virtual version, maybe where you each separately watch the movie and then you have that as a talking point, kind of like a book club, but a movie club where you then can
Good
come
idea.
together and share your thoughts while you do something separate at each other's homes. And then you, like how I did the dinner date, but through FaceTime basically. Or if you watch separately and then you can go for a walk and talk about it, or go get ice cream and walk and talk about the movie. So you at least have a subject matter you both are on the same page about, and then can like explore that.
Yeah.
I love that
counsel.
idea of like seeing how they react is like could open your eyes to a lot of like different personality quirks or traits that the person that you're potentially interested in will start talking about. And a lot of times in movies there's like something deep going on, and like so it could have like a pretty provocative conversation potentially. It could provoke that. But I think in theory this makes sense, right? Like if you just go on a movie, you're not talking at all, so you're just like watching the movie. And if you're just going to dinner, it may have a lack of like fun, or something to like start from like an equal starting point, right? Which is the topic of the movie. I think it could go long, but like what Jen's mentioning is good. Like right now you could do a virtual movie where you watch separately and then talk about it. But I think if you're going to do anything like a movie, it has to be followed up by something. And this could be one of those things where if we go back to planning ahead to the first thing, you could say, okay, I want to go on a movie date with you. You could tell the person, hey, if you have time after, let's see how we feel. Maybe we can do something after.
Yeah.
If you think that it's going kind of well and you're getting a good vibe from the person just by initial talk before the movie starts, then maybe you go, okay, hey, did you want to go grab some ice cream? And if it's not going great, you have an out. You can be like, you know what? I actually don't think I have time tonight to go out after, but let's be in touch. And then later you can, maybe say, okay, yeah, I didn't feel like an emotional connection with you or whatever. But I think that could be planning, right? Like you could have the idea to do something secondarily.
Yeah. Because people always say dinner and a movie. And the problem with that is that with if like things have been awkward at dinner, and then you go to then you have to sit next to them in a movie, like that's even worse as opposed to, I think. And so that
doesn't work.
At least having the movie first, it gives you some ammunition to try to, once the conversation really starts, because you don't really talk in a movie theater. So
for sure. And
that's
also,
that's the downside to the movie date, is that you don't really get to talk very much in a movie date. But if you can combine it with some other thing, then you can actually talk about the movie.
For sure. And also like kind of like what you were saying, Lauren, like I don't like, no one should feel, rude if they want to end the date early. It's just a matter of how you do it. Like I actually went out with a guy who said, why don't we meet at this spot for drinks and then we'll walk to this spot for dinner. After the first part of the date was over, we both agreed we were not feeling it. So we skipped the dinner part and went our separate ways. So like there's a way to have that conversation where you sort of check in with them and say like, hey, so how do you think this is going? Or are you still interested in going to dinner? Or do you feel like maybe this is not a match? Like however you want to phrase it, that makes sense for you and feel still polite and like, with integrity, you can easily course correct. So you're not stuck.
Yeah. Well, our last advice is I'd always heard this whole rule of like wait 3 days after, so you don't appear overeager after a first date. And I just think that's stupid. I think especially in this day and age where we have so many ways to communicate, whether it's social media or texting or whatever. And I think if you I don't think there's anything wrong if you had a good experience of texting the person, or yes, you can be overeager, but I feel like when it's too much. When it's like when you're doing,
Are you saying,
I don't think you need to wait 3 days.
so you're saying to contact the person again,
Right.
you should wait
No, I don't
3
think
days.
you need
Yeah,
to. I think that rule of thumb is dumb. I don't think you need to wait.
I
If you,
I completely
yeah.
agree. I what I always say, it would be lovely if we could control people with our own decisions, but guess what, guys? You can't. So it really doesn't matter if you text somebody one day after a date, or 2 days, or 8 days, or 1 hour. It's not going to control how they feel about you, because guess what? If we could do that, we'd all be rich and like
Right.
married or not married or whatever you want. Like you could control everyone. You can't. It doesn't matter. If someone likes you, they like you. Have you ever liked somebody that like wasn't good news, like the bad boy or that guy's kind of trouble, or oh, it probably doesn't make sense to be going out with this guy, but like I kind of like him. Like you wish that it would come into play. Like, oh yeah, he's maybe not the best like match for me, but there's something about him that I really like. You can't help that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not. Then think about it in the reverse. If
Yeah.
you like somebody, does it matter when they text you back? It doesn't matter. You're not going to be like, oh, well, I
Right.
really liked him, but he
Exactly.
took 40 said it. Never mind. It's off the, like, no. So you're not going to control whether someone likes you or not. If you look over eager and they like you, they're not going to care. If you
Right.
look over eager and they don't like you, they're going to care, because not because you're over eager, but because they don't like you.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. Exactly. That's exactly right. and I feel like most of the time, after that first date, if there's potential here, if it's like, yes, like you don't want to totally write someone off, but I feel like like that chemistry is there or it's not. What do you think about that?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Well,
Jen.
Well, yeah,
Jen.
I mean, I
Yeah.
will take that one. So I think there's like a couple different types of chemistry. One is like whether you have communication chemistry. The other is if you have physical chemistry. And like sometimes you really just don't even like the way someone's pheromones smell. And that's something you cannot control no matter what. Then there's also like the physicality of it. So like if you kiss somebody and then you just sort of like having misconnections there because it's just not working. So I think chemistry is easiest to see by communication, and then once you have that, I think that's like the most important, because at least you could talk to the person. And then if you don't have necessarily like the physical oomph you wanted to feel, you could at least talk to that person and you have that foundation there. But if you don't have a chemistry in your banter and like your way of communicating, then that's going to be a struggle and a push and a pull. And it's like, you really don't need to force it because there's a million people out there. So why try and find chemistry with somebody if it's really just not even there in the foundational area?
Yeah, I agree. Well, what do you think of my tips as a whole? Do you think I did a good job? Or
these tips are great.
Good.
You've covered, and I think, in my opinion, so many different things that have to do with like beginning stages, middle stages, end stages, and something to just like get you started, like is really, really great, because dating makes people nervous. It's a nerve-wracking process.
Sure.
So if you can think about these things beforehand and maybe feel a little bit more prepared, it takes a little bit of anxiety away potentially. And I think, once you're on the date and you just kind of take a deep breath and relax and have these things in your back pocket, it's going to be easier. And they are also helpful tips for like future, right? Because you want to know if this person's going to work out in the future. And if you maybe avoid talking about this certain thing until maybe a little bit later, or you throw some stupid rules out because it doesn't matter, so you can relax a little bit more, like that will help in the long run, help you find someone that's a better match.
Yeah, I think so. Well, good. I'm glad that I succeeded. That makes me excited. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming and for talking about this crazy world of dating. It's so it can feel overwhelming to think about, honestly, and so it's nice to kind of break it down. And so let us know if you're listening what you think about what we talked about, whether about each of the different rules or whether you have different rules that we didn't mention. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section or on Twitter. That would be great. And why don't you tell people where they can find your podcast, all your social media, all that fun stuff?
You can find me at Jennifer Golden on all the social media platforms. And together you can find us at Complicated Show on all the social media platforms and everywhere you get your podcasts.
And you can follow me at Lauren Leonelli on all the social media platforms as well. And yeah, just keep, share this podcast, share our podcast, like let everyone know what you think, tell a friend, comment. We love all that. We love engaging with everybody and like with other, like Rachel, with your audience. It's fun to talk about what's going on right now. I think we all just need to remain connected.
Yeah.
And I think that just helps everybody. We're all, like the saying, we're all in this together.
Yes, exactly. And you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check all of that out. And you make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Podcast and Hallmarkies Pod, all over social media. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it for both of our podcasts. Please do. And if you're listening on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That means so much. We have our patron group, which is a lot of fun. And then we also have our merch store, which we have Hallmarkies inspired merch for Christmas in July. Lots of fun stuff on there. So thanks so much to both of you. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And we'll definitely have to have you back on again once new movies get rolling. It'll be great.
Yeah, we would love that.
All right. Well, bye, everyone.